Hi, this is Pratik and welcome to Code Verify. In this video lesson, we'll learn about analyzing time complexities. In this following problem, there are two for loops. In the first for loop, there is a sum operation, and in the second for loop, there is a product operations. Both of these operations do a constant amount of work, and they take a constant amount of time, that is big O of 1. For the first for loop, this constant amount of work is done every time the first for loop runs, and the first for loop runs for n number of times where n is the length of the array. Therefore, this constant amount of work is done n number of times, and therefore we can say that the overall time taken by this first for loop is big O of n. For the second for loop, there is a product operation which does a constant amount of work every time this for loop runs, and this for loop runs for n number of times where n is the length of the array. Therefore, the overall time taken by this for loop to run is big O of n. The print operation at the end also does a constant amount of work and takes a time of big O of 1. If we see the overall time taken by the entire program to run, then that is big O of n plus n, which is nothing but big O of 2n. We can neglect the constant time taken by this print operations because it's just a constant. Now the overall time is big O of 2n. We can eliminate the constant 2 and say that the overall time taken to run this problem is big O of n. Now let's consider another problem. In this problem, there are two for loops, and each for loop runs for n number of time where n is the length of the array. The print operation takes a constant amount of time, that is big O of 1. The first time the first for loop runs, then the inner for loop runs for n number of times, and each time the inner for loop runs, it does a constant work of, and that constant work takes a time of big O of 1, which is again a constant. Therefore, the first time the outer for loop runs, the inner for loop takes a time of big O of n, or we can say that the work done is n. The second time the outer for loop runs, the inner for loop again does a work of n, and every time the outer for loop runs, the inner for loop does a work of n every time. The outer for loop runs for n number of times, therefore the inner for loop at each time does a work of n. We can sum up all these and it comes out to be n square. Therefore, the overall time taken to run this entire program is big O of n square. Now let's take up a similar problem. Now this problem is almost similar as that of the previous problem, but the only difference here is that the inner for loop runs from I plus 1 to the length of the array. We can consider the length of the array to be n and the time taken by the print operation to be constant. The first time the outer for loop runs, the inner for loop runs for 1 to n minus 1, and therefore the total number of time is n minus 1. The second time the outer for loop runs, the inner for loop runs from 2 to n minus 1, which is equal to n minus 2. The third time the outer for loop runs, the inner for loop runs from 3 to n minus 1, which is equal to n minus 3. Similarly, for the last time the outer for loop runs, the inner for loop will run for only one time. If we add up all these, then we see that the overall time taken is n minus 1 into n divided by 2, which is nothing but big O of n square. Now there is one more way to calculate the overall time complexity of this problem. Let's see it. Now suppose I tell you to find the average amount of work here. The first work is a work of 1 unit, the second work is a work of 2 units, and so on. To find the average amount of work, you will look in the middle and you will say that the average amount of work is approximately 5. Similarly, the average amount of work done here is n minus 1 divided by 2, which is approximately equal to n divided by 2. Therefore, the inner for loop does an average amount of work n upon 2 every time the outer for loop runs, and the outer for loop runs for n number of times. Therefore, the overall time complexity is n upon 2 multiplied by n, which is big O of n square.